Climate campaigners are pressing for more, a tenfold increase in climate financing commitments to Africa from the West's 2009 $100 billion number to $1.3 trillion amid broken promises of funds for a region that suffers the most from climate change but contributes the least to it. These demands were expressed at a recent pre-COP27 media briefing in Kigali, Rwanda. According to the California-based climate policy organization Climate Policy Initiative, Africa receives only about $30 billion in annual climate funding. Although fewer than 4% of global carbon emissions come from Africa, the continent has experienced some of the harshest impacts of climate change, with increases in temperature occurring faster than usual. One of the most severe droughts in the Horn of Africa region has been brought on by climate change this year. In April, flooding in South Africa claimed at least 453 lives, while deadly tropical storms in Madagascar and Mozambique claimed hundreds of lives. On August 3, flash floods in the town of Mbale claimed the lives of at least 24 Ugandans, displacing 5,600 people and destroying more than 5,000 acres of crops. According to the 2019 Save the Children report, floods, cyclones, and landslides in Somalia, Mozambique, Sudan, Kenya, and Malawi resulted in nearly 1,200 fatalities. African countries are expected to fully participate at the COP27 Climate Summit in Egypt in November. Emphasis is placed on the necessity for an Afrocentric strategy to boost the continent's desire for additional funding. Critics claim that the promised $100 billion was only a figure. It didn't satisfy the most vulnerable developing countries' climatic needs. Africa has never received enough compensation for losses and harm that it didn't inflict. In September, the California-based climate policy group Climate Policy Initiative calculated that only about $30 billion in annual climate funding is allocated to Africa. Additionally, it projects that by 2030, financing Africa's demands for mitigation would cost $1.6 trillion, in addition to an extra $580 billion for adaptation and $242 billion for dual-benefit measures. This is less than the $1.3 trillion the continent is requesting. Although fewer than 4% of global carbon emissions come from Africa, the continent has experienced some of the harshest impacts of climate change, with increases in temperature occurring faster than usual. According to a 2019 World Meteorological Organization assessment, Africa's GDP could decrease by up to 12.12% if temperatures rise by 4 degrees Celsius beyond pre-industrial levels. According to the World Health Organization, between 2030 and 2050, climate change will kill an additional 250,000 Africans annually. According to a 2021 report by the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, climate change has caused a 45.6% increase in the number of undernourished individuals in Africa since 2012. In 2020, there were 281.6 million hungry individuals on the continent, 46.3 million greater than in 2019. Therefore, the argument in favor of carbon credits is a skytrap for Africa. The continent comes in last in terms of funding and green development mechanisms in the global carbon market, which increased by 164% to a record $851 billion last year. The largest market for trading carbon credits is in Africa, but what are the responsibilities of the sellers and buyers? Rich countries do not want to decarbonize their economies. It's a sky trap. Rather than cutting emissions, they pay poor countries to run projects that lower emissions and take credit for that. Africa doesn't have emissions to cut, but emissions to avoid. What are your expectations of the incoming COP27 Climate Summit? Thanks for watching. If you like this type of content, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more stories.